Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joy Hatchett, and I'm the Deputy Commissioner at the Maryland Insurance Administration. And I want to first thank you all for joining us this afternoon during this month of Flood Awareness Month. This month, we are really trying to focus on making consumers and business owners more aware about things that they can do to help understand the risk that's involved with flooding, things that they can do to mitigate that risk, and also steps that they can take to protect themselves and their property against the damage that flooding can cause. Today's focus will be on flood insurance and give you some information about flood insurance, the types of things that it covers, it doesn't cover, and then also give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. We're going to start out by giving you a brief presentation, and it'll be a very brief presentation. The slides in this recording will be available at the end of probably about the end of the week on the Maryland Insurance Administration's website. So don't worry if you miss anything, because you'll have the opportunity to hear the presentation again and also see the slides. And then once the presentation is finished, you'll have the chance to ask any questions. And to the extent that I'm able, I will answer those questions. But if you have questions that I don't know the answer to, what we'll do is we'll get back to you with those questions. Now, during the presentation, if a question comes to mind, feel free to put that question in the chat, and we will go through all of those questions at the end of the presentation. So let me start off by telling those of you who aren't aware what the Maryland Insurance Administration is. We're the state agency that regulates the insurance industry. We make sure that the insurance companies, the insurance producers, also known as the agents and the brokers, comply with all of Maryland laws. And as the regulator, we are making sure that the policies they sell are in compliance with the laws. We make sure that the rates that they charge are not inadequate, excessive, or unfairly discriminatory. And we also look at consumer complaints. And we do that for all types of insurance. We do that for property insurance, for commercial policies. We do it for health insurance and life insurance. Now, as I indicated, today we're going to be focused merely on flood insurance. Next slide, please. So, and at the end of this, you will see our website that's listed. We have lots of consumer materials and information to help you better understand your particular policy. Next slide, please. So let's start off by talking about your homeowner's insurance. And as most of you already know, as a general rule, your homeowner's insurance doesn't cover flooding. That said, there are some types of water damage that are going to be covered by your standard homeowner's policy. Next slide. So some examples. All of you probably have heard about something called water sewer backup. That's basically when a mechanism that's meant to take the water away from your home backs up and brings that water into your home. So if you purchase a water sewer backup endorsement, and you actually have to purchase that endorsement, then that may be some water damage that is covered by your homeowner's policy. But once again, let me stress that you have to purchase separately that water sewer backup coverage. Now, some of the insurance companies will basically call it an endorsement. Some companies may call it a rider, but it is in addition to your homeowner's policy. And companies will also offer different amounts of that water sewer backup coverage. Now, the companies are required to offer up to policy limits, so you have control over how much coverage you purchase so that you can decide how much you want to pay for that coverage. Next slide, please. The other instance where water may be covered, water damage, excuse me. So let's say you have a pipe and there's a sudden and accidental burst of that pipe, which causes water to flow all over your floors and damage your floors. If it is a sudden and accidental bursting of the pipes, then as a general rule, your homeowner's policy will cover the damage. Now, it will not cover the repair or replacement of the pipe itself as a general rule. Also, notice the words I said, sudden and accidental. If it's a slow leak, let's say it's a leak behind the wall, or what frequently happens, a leak behind the refrigerator, and you don't discover it, that is neither sudden or accidental. So that is going to be excluded under the terms of your policy as a general rule. Also, let's say it's the winter. You decide you don't want to stay in Maryland, so you go to Florida and you turn your heat off. That's not accidental because you have taken steps to not maintain your heat. And so once again, that is something that generally speaking will not be covered by your homeowner's policy. Next slide, please. So the types of things that might be covered. Let's say we have rain, and that rain enters either your roof or your window sills. That may be covered. The reason that I'm saying it may is the first question is going to be, has your roof been maintained? And what type of coverage do you have for your roof under your homeowner's policy? The other question is going to be, if it enters through a door or a window, is it surface water that entered at a ground level? If that's the case, then that also might not be covered by your homeowner's policy. Next slide, please. So take a look at this slide, and this is an important slide. This tells you a comparison between homeowners, what's may be covered under your homeowner's policy, and the things that may be covered under a flood insurance policy. You see things under your homeowners, the roof, the bursting of pipes, you see things that may be covered under the flood insurance policy. And we're going to get ready to go into more detail as to what's covered under the flood insurance policy. Next slide, please. So this is the standard definition of a flood. And this definition, as a general rule, is the definition that exists in all policies. This is basically the definition that Congress determined what is considered a flood. And so you'll find it under the flood insurance policies, but you'll also find it in some homeowners policies as to what is excluded. And it's pretty rudimentary. Basically, it's water that inundates 2 or more acres of dry land. Now, and we'll talk about this later, that 2 or more acres or 2 or more properties. 2 or more properties can be your property and the road. And it doesn't always have to be adjacent properties. You can have instances where the property, there's water damage on your property, and then a couple of houses down, there's water damage on that other person's property. And because of the gradation, that also may be deemed to be a flood. Next slide, please. And so there's certain types of things that are generally excluded from the flood loss. And once again, this is all set by the congressional definition. Mudslides, earth movements, and things of that nature. And there's one specific site that you'll see throughout this presentation that I want to refer everyone to. Floodsmart.gov. Once again, that's floodsmart.gov. And that will go into a lot more detail about the definition and the things that you might be able to learn about both your homeowners and the flood insurance policies. Next slide. Now, you all know that for your homeowners policy, you buy one policy and it covers the structure and all of your stuff. Flood insurance, as a general rule, does not work that way. You purchase one policy for the structure. That's the walls, the floors, your furnace, and things like that. And as a general rule, that has a coverage limit up to $250,000. So if you happen to have a home that is, to rebuild that home is more than $250,000, then you need to look at getting an excess policy to cover the amounts over the $250,000. Because if your flood insurance policy is exhausted, it's never going to pay more than $250,000 for the structure. But that's just the structure. Your stuff. For flood insurance, you have to buy a separate policy for your personal property. That means your clothing, your furniture, your actual stuff. So let's say you have a major flood and your home and all of your stuff is destroyed. If you only have a policy that covers the structure, then you will not get paid anything for your stuff. Now, the personal property limit is up to $100,000. And people will often say, well, wait a second, can't I file a claim under my homeowner's policy for my stuff? No. Flooding is considered a peril that is specifically excluded. So if the flooding damages your stuff, then you will never be able to get coverage for that claim under your homeowner's policy. So the bottom line is you need to consider, and we never tell people that you must buy flood insurance, but what we do tell them is they need to consider purchasing flood insurance for both their structure and their contents. Next slide, please. Now, one of the other things that makes a flood insurance policy different than your homeowner's policy is the location of the damage. Basements have very limited coverage under the flood insurance policy. And what you'll see here is we describe the primary things that are covered in a basement. It's basically the drywall and the foundation, the sump pumps, the water tanks, and furnaces. Things that are not covered. If you've finished the walls, let's say you've got a basement and you've decided to turn it into this beautiful office space, and you've put up wonderful paneling, you've put your computers down there, you've put a nice couch down there, and you may even have put a television or other electronics down there. Those things are not going to be covered in that basement. Even if you have contents coverage, those items are not going to be covered. And so what we tell people is you need to think about what you put in your basement. And for those people that use their basement as a living space, then consider moving things up onto blocks or shelving so that they won't get damaged. Because even some people will say, well, what I'll do is if I think we're going to have a heavy rain, I'll just move it out of the basement. Well, sometimes we have storms that we can't predict, so you can't always move things out of the basement. Next slide, please. The other thing that you need to know about flood insurance is that the policy generally only covers if there's direct physical loss to your structure or belongings. That means that the water actually has to touch and damage the structure and belongings. That's what it means by direct physical loss. Next slide, please. And this is just a list of the things that the structured coverage generally protects. And so, as I said, you'll be able to get these slides and look at our website. So I won't go over all of these particular items. Next slide. And once again, this is a list of the types of contents, that second policy, that would be covered as long as these items are not in the basement. And one of the things that I really like to point out is the limits on artwork and furs. We've had instances where individuals have beautiful artwork and the flooding goes up and it actually damages it. The limit is up to $2,500. Remember that. Next slide, please. So these are what's excluded. And the primary thing that I like to really focus on is the water sewer backup. And this is why it's important that you have both water sewer backup under your homeowner's policy, and you consider whether you need flood insurance, because they don't cover the same thing. Next slide. Now, here's a couple of things that currently are things that aren't covered under a flood insurance policy, although there have been discussions as to potentially changing some of these coverages. The additional living expenses, that is something that normally under your homeowner's insurance policy, if you're displaced, there's coverage for that. Also, one of the big things that people look to are coverage for things like fences and things of that nature. For businesses, coverage for business interruption, generally not covered. Automobiles, generally not covered. Your stock certificates and things of that nature, also generally not covered. And once again, personal property that's in the basement, not going to be covered. Next slide. So the big thing that I always want to emphasize is, and the question that we frequently get is, someone has been told that they can't buy flood insurance. First and foremost, just about everyone in the state of Maryland can buy flood insurance. You do not need to live in a special hazard flood zone to make that purchase. Homeowners, renters, and business owners can buy flood insurance. If you speak with someone that tells you that you can't buy it, I would recommend that you talk to a different agent or visit that floodsmart.gov website, and they can give you direction as to who you may be able to purchase flood insurance from. Once again, you do not need to live in a special hazard flood zone in order to purchase flood insurance. In fact, if you don't live in a special hazard flood zone, the cost of that policy may end up being significantly cheaper. Next slide. So where can you buy it? As I indicated, that website, floodsmart.gov, gives you information on the National Flood Insurance Program. And that's also known as the NFIP. And that is a federal program. All of those policies essentially look alike. And they are sold by private insurance companies, but that is a federal policy. Next slide. You also can go into the private market and buy flood insurance. There are some companies that have decided that they will sell a private flood insurance policy. If you go to our website, and as I said, you can go and look on our website, and there in this link, it'll give you a list of the various companies that will sell you private flood insurance. Now, some companies will only sell excess flood insurance. Some of these companies will sell first dollar coverage. What you need to do is to talk with the company and find out the specifics, and also talk to, if you currently have a mortgage, talk to your lender to see if they will accept the policy that is issued through this private insurance company. In addition, surplus lines companies will also sometimes sell flood insurance. The only thing that I want to make sure people understand is we, as a state regulatory agency, have very limited jurisdiction over surplus lines companies. So if something goes wrong, either in the transaction or the payment of the claim, we are limited in as far as what we can do with respect to that flood insurance surplus lines policy. Next slide. So here's some basic facts. First off, flood insurance, it's a huge risk, and everyone should consider. We're not ever, as I said, we're never going to say you must buy, but you need to consider the risk and the propensity of your particular policy to be damaged by flooding. And there's some lenders that are going to say, we're not going to loan you money unless you have a flood insurance policy. Also, think about the power of water and how much damage water can cause. And as indicated in item 4, an inch of water can actually cause about $20,000 or more in damage to your property. And if you just look at, Maryland has not had major hurricanes or tropical storms, but what we have had are damage caused by heavy rains. And we've had damage all over the state. So you don't have to live near a huge body of water in order for your home to be severely damaged from flooding.
Well, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. So, as a reminder, you can buy flood insurance as long as you live in a community that participates in the NFIP. And most people live in those communities. Also, if you live in a community that's considered a low risk area, you may be able to purchase flood insurance at a far lesser cost than someone that lives in a high risk zone. And the last slide gives the contact information for us, including our website, and also gives, once again, the website for floodsmart.gov. And that concludes the presentation. So, oh, 1 minute, one more slide. Sorry about that. Here's the contact information for MDIM, which is the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, and also the contact information for FEMA, which is the federal counterpart for the emergency management. And then on the very last slide, we have information that's on our website and several helpful publications. So, Craig, I don't know whether we have any questions in the chat or not.
Yes, if you do have a question, please put it in the chat. We can also allow you to speak if you'd like. I'm not seeing any questions, Joy.
All right, then. So as I said, probably by the end of the week, this presentation and the slides will be available on our website. And as always, if you have other additional questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us.
We do have a question now from Joshua
Okay.
Norris. Joshua, can you hear us?
Yes, just wanted to let you know that the chat feature is not available. So there might be individuals that are trying to put things in the chat, but we're not able to use it.
Okay.
Well, if anyone has questions, just raise your hand and we'll take the questions. Craig can take you off mute, or you can take yourself off of mute, and we can answer any questions folks have.
I have one question since I have the mute feature activated. So ultimately, when it comes to the private insurance that you mentioned, does that also require a community to participate in the NFIP?
What I would say is it doesn't require the participation in the NFIP, but what you should do is to reach out to the particular carrier and find out if there are any other limitations, because different carriers will have, just like with your homeowners insurance, various underwriting guidelines. So carriers may say, well, we won't write a flood insurance policy within 100 miles of a body of water, or we won't write flood insurance in certain zip codes. So I would say, while you don't have the same community participation requirements, the particular company may have different requirements.
Good, thank you.
I'm not seeing any other hands.
All right, then. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope this has provided you with some helpful information, and please spread the word to your friends and family and coworkers about all of the important information that we shared with you here today. Have a great day and thank you.